Hello and welcome to This Week at the Movies. I'm Matt.
And I'm Eric.
And this week we are going to be diving in and looking at a couple of films. This was a big week for wide release opportunity films. We've had a few weeks where you just had one kind of big tentpole release of the week. Last week, I'm also considering it only one because I refuse to acknowledge that Purple Crayon movie exists. But this week there were actually four major releases, three wide theater releases, and one a fairly prominent streaming release. We're going to look at two of them. The first of which continues our theme, really, of 2024, and that is it has been a big year for horror films. It has also been a big summer for horror films. We always typically see them in early winter because they're usually cheap and easy to produce. You get a lot of them that come out in the January, February timeframe. You also usually get a lot of them once you're into Halloween season, but we have seen them sprinkled throughout the year, a lot of different varieties, a lot of different styles coming from some big indie studios. That's the case with Cuckoo, which released this week, comes from Neon. Has a pretty high profile cast led by Hunter Schafer and Dan Stevens, who was earlier this year in both a film in the MonsterVerse, Godzilla X Kong, and was in a horror film, Abigail. So he's having a big year. This one comes from Tillman Singer. It's probably the first film that American audiences are going to be familiar with. This one's set in the Bavarian Alps. Not a bad location. And we meet Gretchen. That's Schaefer's character. She's a 17-year-old girl that's kind of forced to relocate with her family after her mother passes away. So she's in this raw space of grief. She clearly doesn't have an affinity for her stepmother, played by Jessica Henwick, or her stepsister, who can only talk with the aid of an electronic device. She has a very icy relationship at best with her father, played by Martin Cossacks. That's what I'm going to guess right now. But they arrive, and the guy that owns this mountain resort, played by Dan Stevens, ushers them in. Her father, and stepmother are allegedly there to build a new resort. She's trying to find a way out as soon as possible. Takes a job working at his existing resort, where some strange things begin occurring, and that leads her down the rabbit hole. They're real careful not to give any of this away in marketing, which beyond that basic description, which makes it unique among some of the films we've seen marketed this year. So I'm not going to give away too much. Also, because my criticism for this movie would be that we don't always get a great explanation for what has happened and what all is going on. I thought some of it was a little confusing, and a lot of it was underbaked in the third act, which was a struggle for me. I liked the setting. I actually really liked Schaefer in that role, and I liked some of the emotional beats that we get later in the film between her and her steppish sister Alma, played by Mila Liu. That was enough to keep me engaged. I really enjoyed Dan Stevens in this movie too, but there were some elements that did not quite work for me. I am giving it a thumbs neutral. I thought there was a lot of potential. I was on the fence of whether I was out on the movie. There were some emotional things in the third act that kind of brought it back to the midpoint for me, but this did not click the way I thought it might after seeing the trailers. Looks like you were more fond of it.
Yeah, it clicked for me in a big way. I really, really enjoyed this. I'm going to give it one solid thumb up, not necessarily two, but that's partially because I ironically felt they over-explained the process and the ending and what's going on. I think that'll probably be a conversation for after about, like, you know, I agree with you that there are moments where characters are making choices that don't feel realistic to the choices they would make in the moment. But at the same time, I've never been in that situation. And like, I don't know, like, I just thought direction is phenomenal. Hunter Schafer is amazing. Dan Stevens is effective as a character that is usually impossible for me to take seriously. The eccentric doctor who is clearly something about him that's not okay, and he has these tendencies and this obsession with cuckoo birds, and like it's just this very I should dislike him, but I don't. I thought he did a great job. I don't know who the actor is that plays the. There is a gentleman who is police and is attempting to assist
Yeah,
Hunter Schafer with
Dan
tracking down.
Bluthart,
Yes,
or
and
Jan, probably, because I think he actually is German.
that in particular, in the third act, there's a way that Hunter Schafer tries to like pull at him to make him act a certain way, and I don't think that entirely makes sense, but everything worked well enough for me. The thing that I was like the most, well,
So
I also don't want to spoil any of
yeah,
this for people, because I felt so excited to go into this kind of blind. I only saw the first trailer for this, the one that played in front of Longlegs.
I think
That's
there is
very
only one trailer I've seen. That all the trailers, I've seen the trailer before a lot of films, but I've only ever seen one version. I think that's great. I wonder partially if it's because the marketing people couldn't figure out how to market it, but maybe that works out for them,
yeah.
because we have talked about some of these movies could have been even better if they held more back, and this one held enough back. But
Abigail. Yeah.
I guess part of it too is Hunter Schafer's character feels pretty three-dimensional, and towards the end they kind of bring an arc and more depth for Alma that makes her more interesting. Dan Stevens' character isn't particularly three-dimensional, but I didn't mind so much, and that's kind of the nature of what he's doing, but nothing else really was developed enough or explained enough for me to I had more questions and wasn't invested in some of the, like, I like Jessica Henwick as an actor. We've seen her be very engaging even in crappy things. Iron Fist. But
that's where I first saw her.
There was zero engagement for me with the parents here. They don't even seem like they have any chemistry with each other. I did not understand how they're together or what they're doing why they liked this place.
That makes so much sense, though. This idea, like, I know I'd want them to love and care about each other and be together, but knowing what you know about their daughter and whatnot, the idea of there being like, and also just the relationship with Hunter Schafer's character, that we're aligned with the perspective of someone who is alienated from this family and doesn't like the way that they're connected. Like, there's just, I feel like it works for me enough in the moments where
explain what happened to the people or what they were doing or what they were trying to accomplish.
Well, but now I just want to get into what they were doing to the people and what they were trying to accomplish, because that's, to me, I feel like it's a simple thing. I feel like, broadly speaking, Dan Stevens and his community of eccentric rich people, or whoever they are, is interested in preservation of life of something. And they created a little community resort that allows them to facilitate the procreation of that thing. And we're just happening to watch the perspective of one person who's an outlier who doesn't fit into that community, that are normally vetted and carefully, screened to be a part of things. And it's just that. The idea is that Dan Stevens is so obsessed with the preservation of this creature that he doesn't have like the humanity, and that's the kind of thing they do with these doctor characters, is they're like, this thing is so much more important than people's lives. Like it's again, it's something that should, I don't think work. I just think Dan Stevens sells it really well. But I don't think there's much more to it than that. But I then going into like Jessica Henwick's protection and like her connection with her daughter, that is one thing that they don't explain, is her getting sick towards the end of the movie.
That part I actually did catch. The nurse gives her a tea to get her out of the way.
It gives her tea, but
there was something.
She's getting sick when they give her the pill and the tea.
Yeah,
but I don't know. Whatever.
They gave her something to temporarily make her sick, so that would drive them out. Because she was threatening to stay with her daughter, which would be more explainable. I mean, like, let me ask you this: as a parent that cares about your child, would you have just taken them to a strange research center in a strange foreign country and just left them there and been like, "Oh, I'm sure all this makes sense"?
If I were a founder, had been there on my honeymoon and conceived that child there, and I trusted the doctor that was inviting me there, and then I had to awkwardly bring my child from a previous marriage with me, and she was causing fights between me and my wife, and like, I buy it.
Well, and that was the other thing. They never give much of a. You don't get enough to understand the dynamics of their family, or the characters are just so flat. And I thought the world was so flat and weird. And weird is okay. There is weird that, weird was part of what engaged me about the premise, but weird to the point of being disconnected is what I often felt, to the point where when it ended, I was like, well, that was okay. I'll never see it again.
Mm-hmm. I'm kind of a sucker for giallo horror and like mystery thriller films, and there's enough flavor of that in there, and enough direction and enough attention to like the mood and shift and things like that, that I just really appreciated the tone and the sort of blend of genres. But yeah, I can see, I mean, it is weird which characters they choose to round out and which characters they don't. Yeah. So, sorry, there's an animal scratching at the door.
I mean, it was definitely unique. And I don't think it's bad, even though it wasn't. Yeah. I'll say it just didn't feel like my cup of tea. I didn't get enough from it for it to really make an impact, despite, there were things that I did like. I mentioned some of the emotions. There are some ways that they really heighten that relationship between the sisters, and that was actually a story arc that I thought came a really long way and was engaging. So it's like, it almost felt like the parts they chose to care about worked, and the parts that maybe they didn't care as much about, you just didn't get a whole lot. But
it is really hard to talk about this movie because, like, yeah, I don't know how many people are watching. Like, we could talk a little bit about what happens, but
I mean, you can feel free. I still don't understand what happened or what I was supposed to take away from it, other than it ended.
Okay. I don't know what they're going to do in the future. I don't know how. I would like for them to have just explained a little bit more about how, I'll just say there's a creature. The creature lives. Like, they spent so much time trying to make. Yeah, well, they explained it's a sort of a maladapted, malformed type of human that has something in common with the cuckoo bird, and that way that it reproduces is the reason why they named it like they were using a scientific term that involves humanoid and cuckoo bird. And it's just, I wish I could see, like, do they, like, we know, we get the impression that the mother cares for the child, but do they like live together? Like, it doesn't totally clear. Like, what do they eat? Like, what do they like? How close to human are they? Because they're used like kind of like you said, the movie is so focused on making this creature scary that it doesn't really explain a lot that makes you understand what's going to happen and what the stakes are for Alma.
Or how it's creating its processes. There is a device that is used in the film repeatedly, um, having to do with the structure of time, that also has some quick intercut sequences that are never really explained.
Well, they do the thing, and it causes the person to start looping, and they're free to move forward in time while this person is stuck in time, and that allows them to manipulate the situation. I don't know how that knocks people out or makes them throw up,
Or
but
causes them not to remember what happened.
yeah. But I'm willing to, so the first time we see that device take place, it's different. It just happens a few times, and then suddenly almost strikes her angrily. And the way that everyone reacts to that, that's one of those cases where I'm not 100% sure that people react to that the way that I feel like I would in that situation. But again, I've never been in that situation where it's like I suddenly have to have my daughter who's only ever wanted to live with her mother, and I have this other child who has struck her, but maybe she made her angry, but she didn't, by all we can tell. It's a weird situation, but it's also just really weirdly handled. But then the rules never work the same way again. Like, all of the rest of the time, other than that time, it seems like that device is being used so that the creature can operate while holding everybody else relatively still. And that comes up with like the car wreck, that comes up with the when they're going towards the house, and she's getting closer. Like, I don't know why that creature doesn't use it to catch her on the bike.
Because she's got headphones on.
Oh, so she is using. Yeah,
It's
no,
an
that's fair.
auditory. It's an auditory thing. That's why, like
Yeah,
the
sorry, I
quick
didn't
cut
realize she
to
had
the
headphones on because she
chest.
was on
I
the bike,
guess
because she
I
doesn't
didn't
have the chance to
realize
get to the hospital.
that was the creature. I thought that was what was happening to the individual that was being impacted.
Say that again.
I thought the rapid beating was supposed to be the individual that was being impacted. But
Most of the
that
time,
means it's not very clear in the way it's shot, because you had a different impression than I did.
yeah, like I'm like 99% sure that, like, when we were seeing it, most of the time you could see the floral shirt that the lady has on, and then particularly at the end with Alma, you can see her skin tone compared to her, and but yeah, that's true. Early in the movie, I was questioning like who we were seeing had that thing happen.
Yeah.
Um,
And
yeah,
what it's
I
used.
mean, I don't know how it controls people. But I know that the mechanic of it holding people still so that they can operate is the gist of it. But that's the thing, is at a certain point in the movie, they're over explaining, like, well, this is what the creature is doing to these people, and that explains why your sister is the way that she is, and of course, surprise twist, we're going to explain why the parents uh have to worry about their daughter, and that, like, and I'll say, like, that again, where they cared in the movie, they kind of drove everything to 11,
Mhm.
and where they didn't care, they kind of just like skirt past some details and things.
And
So,
I mean, you see that in surprising ways. There are surprising emotional payoffs of things that I thought were kind of throwaway, like when she's calling her mom's answering machine all
mm-hmm.
the time. feels a little bit like a throwaway,
Yeah.
and then it pays off in a completely surprising way that gives a 180-degree turn to a character's motivation.
Yep.
And so I thought that was fascinating, and that worked really well.
Yeah.
But there are other things that I thought were novel attempts that maybe don't work as
Mm.
well.
Yeah.
It did
Fair.
not make me want to go stay at a quaint lodge in the Bavarian Alps.
No.
So probably not the tourism video Germany was hoping for.
It's a weird dip back to something that I think was more prevalent in the 2000s of Americans making movies that go Europe is scary.
But this, ironically, not an American making the movie; it's a German
I
filmmaker.
know. Yeah.
So but it
Still
was
scary over
probably
here.
more like trying to bring. And part of me wonders. Um, we should look at the plot synopsis for some of his other films. I'm wondering if he just got the chance to make an American version of a previous. I was looking at his previous film, and the plot synopsis doesn't sound quite the same, but you never know. It could have been close. But getting a chance to make a film, so
Mhm.
that part I thought was interesting, and there were some interesting shots and some interesting ways that it was put together. I would be curious to
Oh
see
gosh.
what that filmmaker does next, as long as it's not a
Mm.
sequel to this, because
Yeah.
I don't know, like if they made, first of all, I don't think all movies need sequels or franchises, but if
Right.
they made a sequel, I can't imagine myself being in for this. It's kind of how I feel every time I see the Smile 2 trailer. Like,
Yeah.
why is
Oh
this
my gosh,
being
I've seen that
foisted?
trailer so many times.
And it never gets better. Why is this being foisted upon me? Um, but if he's going to make other interesting horror things, that could be interesting.
Mm.
Well, neither of us hated Cuckoo. We both appreciated certain things. May not be the case for movie number two, which was another big release of the week, Borderlands, based on the popular video game series. I have never played the games, which I will just front right out there. So I'm going to let Eric go first. I have noticed that people that have played the games are seemingly even more nonplussed about this movie. Um, but, it's set in some kind of alternate timeline. It's essentially a treasure hunt with a roguish group of people that get put together that are
Yeah.
played by, as you can see here, Jamie Lee Curtis, who just won an Academy Award, Kate Blanchett, who's won an Academy Award, Kevin Hart, who most people find funny, Ariana Greenblatt, who's fine, Jack Black voicing a precocious robot. It also has Edgar Ramirez in there as kind of a bad guy. A lot of people that you're going to find familiar. Gina Gershon, probably playing one of her most interesting roles in a while. Um, but it probably isn't as good as it could have been. Eric, I think you're more familiar with the Borderlands games.
Nope.
No?
I am not, but I can tell you this movie was bad. This movie was not good. I thought it was fascinating that Kate Blanchett and Jack Black were in Eli Roth's last movie, and that he's sort of got this new phase in his career going where he's like doing family blockbusters. Um, and they're not great. Borderlands in particular was bad. Like I like House of the Clock and its Walls fine, but this okay.
Okay, I had to
I don't know
double check to be sure, but that is not his last movie, by the
what
way.
would he do last?
So The House of the Clock and its Walls was 2018, and I honestly
18.
almost
Okay.
forgot that movie existed. He did a movie called Finn, which is a shark movie in 2021, which I've seen,
Oh,
which is not too bad. But last year he did the horror film Thanksgiving, which I
Oh
actually
yeah,
kind
that's
of
right.
liked. And he is
Okay.
probably best known for his
For horror.
very, very violent horror movies, which is
Yeah.
I I always wonder a little bit when you take somebody that I wouldn't call like what Eli Roth does high art per se. But if you are looking for pretty visceral and violent horror films, that's where he kind of made his name. Cabin Fever, he did that. He did
Awesome.
Hostel, which literally made me hostile having to watch.
Mhm.
Um, and Thanksgiving, which is deeply unsettling in a very holiday way. I actually watched that on Netflix not too long ago, and I kind of enjoyed it, but it was deeply unsettling. It's weird to see those kind of people then get put into something where I almost wonder if they would have just said, it's fine, make an R rated adaptation of this, that it might have been
Um,
better than skirting the PG
yeah.
13 line and
Maybe
having,
some of the action would have mattered.
yeah, because then you just have like these brightly colored, does it want to be Guardians of the Galaxy because it's not that clever and its characters aren't that memorable? Does it want to be this like hardcore action sequence because there is a lot of shooting and there's a lot of violence, but all of it is very stylized in it almost honestly reminds me of what happened with Zack Snyder and Rebel Moon, where Netflix clearly
Yeah.
asked him to make a PG-13. I have not found the 7 hours or the force of will to watch his R-rated cuts of those movies, but it reminds me a little bit of that, where I'm giving it a thumbs down. I'm not saying I enjoyed it. I didn't hate it as much as some people, but I didn't think it was good. I didn't feel like any of the characters mattered. I saw the twist with the main character coming from miles away, and
I
wow.
I didn't even care enough to see the twist coming. I thought the twist was completely unnecessary. Literally, the stakes feel no different to me if the little girl had just been the key, or if suddenly, no, wait, Kate Blanchett is. Like, at least you would have had some sort of consistently narrative, like, satisfying thing of, like, well, something really important came from my home world, and this close relationship came from my home world, and so I have that connection there. And that still kind of exists anyway, so, like, eh. But that is me trying really hard to give the movie credit for something that it does not try that hard to do. There, like, the, the entire cast is just there, just talking, and there's almost nothing happening in the whole movie. The characters go like, oh, let's rescue the girl, let's go find the girl, oh well, let's go find the key, oh well, let's go do the thing, the end. Like, for a video game series that has multiple installments and has decades of fandom, and some people have pointed out this has been a rich area because of its aesthetic for cosplay and costuming. So we have a long time, maybe a decade or more, of people doing better costuming and makeup for themselves than the actual theatrical production of this movie. And so this isn't even the best looking live action thing you can see of this. This is just nothing. This is just and Kate Blanchett has phoenix wings, and 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 Kevin Hart sacrifices himself, but then he's just fine, not a scratch on him.
Yeah, they really didn't. Yeah, there are low stakes, there are no stakes, there are. I never once like thought our protagonists were going to get injured along the way,
Yeah.
and they don't really explain the connection for Jamie Lee Curtis and Kate Blanchett enough for you to have these emotional scenes that they try to pump in there. And there were a lot of like weird decisions and like a weird world. And this is another one where honestly, maybe if you've played the game for years, you just understand the construct of the world right away. They don't. I needed a little more to understand. I mean, I get the basic that they're on a quest, but who are these people and
Dude.
how, they made it sound at the beginning when she's doing that prolific voiceover like it started on Earth. Well, but I don't know if it did now or not, and why these things disappear.
It's the thing is I can't bring myself to care. And that makes so much of the stuff like boring and hard. Like it does not help that we just got Fallout, the TV series that shows like a rich exploration of the functions of different economic. There's people surviving in the wild, people living in a bunker, privileged, not, and different like views, military, non-military, and like watching all of these pieces come together, and and just building up mystique and intrigue in the world that they live in, and for this to take an entire world and franchise and suck as much intrigue out of it as this movie does, I I can imagine people being very angry who are fans of the games having to sit through this and like just like waiting, and then you're finally at the third act of the movie and you're just like, this has done nothing, and then you just have to wait for it to be over or you leave and get your money back. Like, I don't
Well,
know.
and what's interesting is, we had a bunch of releases this week because this is kind of feels like a week in between bigger tentpole films that are coming out this summer, but nothing did very well, and I think it's because they just weren't strong enough to build an audience. Because I was trying to see what the gross. So Borderlands made 8.8 million, landed in fourth place. So probably not. Uh, and
It'll be on VOD next
it
week.
only did 7.7 overseas, bringing its total gross to 16.5. It was $115 million budget plus 30 million of marketing and distribution. So
Uh-oh.
that is a fairly
Yeah,
giant
again.
loss. Contrast, Cuckoo only made 3 million, didn't finish in the top 5, but it only cost 7 million to produce. So
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that Eli Roth maybe likes the games and a studio had some rights that were about to lapse. And this was one of those movies where a studio was like, we have a generic script, we can make it fit the world. You're a fan of the games. And then because Eli Roth had worked with like Cate Blanchett and Jack Black and these people, he was able to get talent to come to it. And that maybe this was just like a studio, like a fantastic fan four stick where they're just like, we're going to lose the rights. We have to make a movie.
well, and
I can see it.
the other wide release theatrical film this week was the one that dominated at the box office, and that was the film It Ends With Us, that was made against a $25 million budget, made 50 million at the domestic box office and 30 million internationally, already sitting at 80 million, knocked Deadpool and Wolverine out of first place.
Wow.
Don't underestimate ladies and fans of romance. I mean, to be honest, I saw that movie before I saw either of the other two.
Was it good?
I liked it better than either of these two.
Okay.
It was fine, and it's much better than one of the other high-profile releases this week was Matt Damon and Casey Affleck team for a movie on Apple TV Plus. That's a heist drama, and it is horrendous. So we got 4 wide releases. It was kind of choose your own adventure for genres. nothing was incredible, and I would guess a lot of it's going to get lost in the shuffle as we turn toward next week when we have more of a tentpole franchise release. But
Mhm.
Borderlands, if they do leave it in a place where you would think maybe they're contemplating whether they want to do um, a franchise, but I see zero interest in it. If you they didn't even have a good international box office. Sometimes things don't hit here, but they at least make some money overseas. But 16.5 against a $145 million budget is probably not a great sign. I also think they've been sitting on this for a while because in interviews, Kate Blanchett talked about rehearsing for her role in Tar, which came out in late 2022 while she was filming this movie. She said on the set she would take breaks and rehearse her conducting and performance for Tar.
Huh.
So it kind of makes you wonder did they look at everything and they're like, this is not good. We're going to wait. We're going to wait. We're going to wait. I mean, I know it's effects heavy, but it had to have been shot quite
If
a
it had all
while
that
ago.
time.
I mean, it's possible it was shot 3 years ago.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm wondering if Jamie Lee Curtis worked on this before she did um, Everything Everywhere All at Once, because that movie also came out in 22 with Tar.
Hmm.
So, kind of an interesting,
Yeah.
kind of an
Yeah.
interesting
So wait, did Eli Roth make
production.
this before Thanksgiving?
Probably.
Okay. Then yeah, it makes sense. If he's filming this in 2021.
Yeah, I mean,
mm,
we can see if they have the filming dates listed. I saw an interview and I thought that was an interesting. I know some things got messed up obviously because of the strike, but if you're talking about you were
Well, if
rehearsing
this was
for
a
another movie that's already had like its festival releases and Oscar run 2 years ago,
yeah.
that's kind of an interesting.
And that would make this a COVID movie, which
Mm,
would explain a
yeah.
lot about the blue screen and the selective shots of characters
So
and
filming dates for this were April 1st to June 22nd, 2021.
yeah. Okay. So this was still when okay. Okay. That explains some things.
Shot in Budapest.
Doesn't help anything, but it explains some things.
But, so it's been more than 3 years since principal photography wrapped on this film because June of 2021, we're in August of 2024.
Yeah.
Kind of an interesting. In that case, maybe they should just be glad it came out.
Yeah. Yeah. Instead of getting Warner Brothers.
Yep, written down. Well, that'll do it for us this week. If you are trying to choose between Cuckoo and Borderlands, do yourself a favor and go see Cuckoo. Next week, we will be looking the new one from Fede Alvarez, Alien Romulus, which, judging by the trailers, looks like a real return to the origins of the franchise. We will also be talking about previous Alien films. There are at least 6 standalone Alien films if you don't count the Alien versus Predator films. So a lot to dissect with some pretty famous people. Ridley Scott has directed 3 of them. James Cameron directed one. David Fincher directed one that he'd probably rather people didn't know about. So a lot of fun to talk about as we dive into Alien next week. And then the week after that will be the week that Eric has waited for since 1994. And that is when The Crow, Bill Skarsgård's The Crow, finally is coming out. They had another trailer for it the other day. It still says it's coming this summer. So they're sticking on this release date, I believe.
So sad. Oh, Bill Skarsgård, the only thing he said about the movie so far is he doesn't like the ending.
Well, something to look forward to. But that'll be a fun horror weekend. So until next week, when we we'll try to avoid having teeth things popping out of our chest. We will see you at the movies.